Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Daniel Estulin, and welcome to Estulin Media. My guest today is Martin Armstrong. Uh, for me, one of the premier economists in the world. Martin, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
You know, your work has been called prophetic, from forecasting sovereign debt crisis, anticipating geopolitical conflict, and now we're living through a world that seems to confirm many of your warnings in the past: unsustainable debt, political fragmentation, markets levitating in defiance of fundamentals, governments losing the trust of their own citizens. So I'd like to go today beyond the headlines, and the conversation is not only about really what's going on in the world today, but the fate of nations, the collapse of the system, and so on and so forth. Let's start with the economy. Martin, are we already in the early stages of a systemic global financial reset?
Yes, I mean it's you know it governments act in their own self-interest. They do not want to actually manage the economy or the country for the long term. It's I just have to win the next election. What comes after that, maybe I won't be here. I mean, this is the reason you see throughout history that empires always rise and then they fall. I mean, nobody's ever beat this cycle yet. Uh, Largely because I mean, this is just human nature. That's what makes history repeat. That a mother still cries if her son died in battle in Roman times as she would today. Um, Human nature doesn't change. The technology may change. So, in the Stone Age, I killed you with a stone. Then it was a sword. Then it was a gun. Now it's going to be nuclear missile. But I mean, the act of violence is still there. It's just the tool changes. That's all.
If we're talking about global financial reset, what are the unmistakable signals for? Because most people don't seem to understand. Are we talking about banking stress? We're talking about sovereign defaults? We're talking about currency realignments, or what?
Now you're looking largely at sovereign defaults. You've recently heard, how Britain and France um, are flirting with the idea of an IMF loan.
Right.
I mean, um, you cannot, throughout history, um, you cannot borrow forever with zero intention of paying anything back. This is the problem. Um, and I mean, the national debt when Ronald Reagan was in power, everybody freaked out because it hit 1 trillion. Today we got interest expenditures just for the year at a trillion. Um, so the problem becomes historically, you can keep kicking the can down the road as long as people are willing to stand in line to buy the new debt. When the new debt, when you can't sell it, all right, that's when the default comes. Um, that's why you saw the European defaults in 1931. Um, the 14th century, the city of Maine, same thing. They couldn't pay their debt. They defaulted. City got sacked. The politicians were even excommunicated by the Pope. you know, um, these things are they're just repeats throughout history. And I mean, as you know, I've dealt with governments around the world. I've been called in from China, the Middle East. I mean, you name it, I've been there pretty much. And I just don't see any difference. Uh,
So do you see this as a kind of a controlled demolition by the elites, or is this part of a natural collapse of unsustainable structures?
no, it's a natural collapse. This isn't really even in um, the benefit of these elites. You can look at um, year 1343. All right, there was basically a default going on in France because they were in war with England. Edward I versus, Philip IV. And so Philip was overvaluing silver to try and pay his debts. And back then, the foreign exchange rates were based upon metal content. So all of a sudden, the value of silver was rising dramatically, creating shortages in Italy because it was getting a higher price in France. And the city of Florence had a two-tier monetary system. The gold florin, was pretty much the major currency for international trade. But domestically, you paid your wages for workers in silver. So with the price of silver going up, manufacture was falling apart. They couldn't afford to pay, the citizens these higher wages. And so there were riots. And what did they do? They blamed the bankers. They went across, they burned down their palaces, stole everything they had, because they thought it was the elites. It did not benefit them as it would today. Because when you get into these types of situations, you're looking at a systemic collapse. And
so Martin, from a historical perspective, then, is there a historical precedent where the debt spiraled, yet the empires remained stable?
No, never. What you have to also understand, like more in the ancient times, they weren't borrowing money; they were just debasing the currency. After Rome fell, you started getting into some of these city-states starting to borrow money. But borrowing really became more of an industry, I would say, by the time you're looking at, the Middle Ages, when you have Gresham was actually a representative of the English crown on the floor of the Amsterdam Exchange. And that's when they were borrowing. Okay, and that's where he came up with his famous Gresham's Law, because he realized that people wouldn't lend to the English crown. They said, well, you debase the currency. So I give you these, I lend you money and the silver coins are 90% pure, and then you pay me back with something that's only 30% pure. So that's what Gresham's Law was about, that bad money drives out good. And he was experiencing that on the floor of the exchange. So it's the debt problem is and how this all dovetails into war. If you pick up the rug and you look at the difference between the American Revolution and the French Revolution. American Revolution was simply based upon really Adam Smith and those philosophies. The French Revolution, that's where communism actually began, about 100 years before Marx. You had the 1793 commune idea in Paris. And what that was more similar to what we're seeing, in the sense that they pitted one group against another. Oh, it's the elites, it's the rich, it's the aristocrats. We got to get them. When even in ancient times, when people would die, they would leave their money to the temple to buy, a path to heaven. So By the time you got to the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church was the largest landholder in France. Not that it bought them or there were churches on everything, but people donated their land to the church for monasteries, things of this nature. So they were looking at the Catholic Church as being rich from land. Of course, it's not cash in the bank. So that's why they went after the priests in the church and everything. You even have Napoleon crowning himself, refusing to accept the crown from the Pope. So they turned it into basically anti-religion, class warfare, you name it. That just about, if he's got more money than me, he's evil. That's pretty much it. And this is why you then saw the Austria, Germany looking at invading France, because what they were doing there was a threat to them politically, overthrowing kings and stuff like this. So then you ended up with the whole Neapolitan, wars with Napoleon. So when you divide a society in that nature, and you turn one group against another, the Germans did that with the Jews. Okay, it was in Ukraine and Germany, the conspiracy was that Trotsky was Jewish. So therefore, they connected it that conspiracy is of communism is really was a Jewish conspiracy. That's why when the Reichstag was burnt, they blamed the communist. All right, so this is the same thing when you're dividing society and pitting one group against another for whatever reason. You do not get stability. The United States didn't do that. So you actually saw a republic form and lasted. All right. Whereas in France, where are we in the Fifth Republic now? And you still get this stuff. I mean, in England, with the Civil War, they still call Catholics papes. And that was 1649. So once you do this, and I think that's the problem. Just look at the Balkans. It was Bismarck in 1888 who said Europe's going to end up in a major war. It's going to come from the Balkans. He saw what I'm talking about. It's ethnic hatred. So Czechoslovakia broke up, Czech Republic, Slovakia. Yugoslavia broke up, Serbia, Croatia, Armenia, etc. This is what you get. That was the Minsk agreement for Ukraine. Donbass should have been allowed to separate like everybody else did, and we wouldn't have had this war. But they wanted this war.
Before I forget, because you mentioned Rome before, let me ask you as a kind of a follow-up. Was Rome destroyed more by military overstretch or by physical collapse? And which of these do you see repeating today?
It was the collapse in confidence that came after 260 AD. What happened was the Emperor Valerian was actually captured by the Persians in 260 AD. You can look on my site. We pulled up the documents. There were even orders. It created a financial panic because, first of all, it was the first time a Roman emperor was ever captured by an enemy. So that was, can you imagine, that would have been like Joe Biden going to Moscow and he throws him in prison, It just created, people question whether Roman coins would still be good. Then that encouraged the barbarians in the north to start invading. Oh, they got away with it, we should. So then you start seeing it coming in from every which angle. And there were in Egypt, they even passed laws that bankers were forced to accept Roman coins. Nobody knew if they would be good or not because they were always worth more than the metal content. Um, that's just simply the way it is. It's a whatever the financial capital of the world is throughout history. Those coins that get imitated. Uh, you find Roman coins even have been discovered in Japan. I mean, they're just they were respected as the economic power of the world. So India routinely imitated the Roman gold ori. Why? Same gold content, but obviously it carried a premium if it had a Roman emperor on it rather than something they produced. So it wasn't just metal at that point in time. There was a premium to these things. And you see the same thing with the coinage of Alexander the Great, Athens. Um, Egypt never issued its own coins until it was conquered by Alexander the Great. Before then, they issued coins imitating Athenian coins so they could at least engage in international trade. They
So
used
we're talking about
receipts.
confidence. We're talking about confidence. So where do you think
Right.
where will confidence break first? Government, central banks, or currencies?
It's probably part and parcel of all. It's mostly I would say that the two riskiest places for confidence is Europe and Japan. Um, the reason I say Europe, you have to understand when they were forming the euro, they came to me. I sat down with them. I said, "This is how we create a currency." Um, all the idea the euro was going to compete with the dollar. I said, it's not going to happen. All right, you have to consolidate the debt, make a national debt. And Helmut Kohl, who was the Chancellor of Germany, he didn't allow the German people to vote. And before he died, he admitted he acted like a dictator, took Germany just into the euro, no vote. And he said if he allowed the German people to vote, he would have lost 7-3. So his condition was no consolidation of the debt, because he thought the German people would think it was bailing out Greece and Italy, etc. Now the problem is this. I mean, I've been a international hedge fund manager. You're dealing in billions. I could pick up the phone and say, "Buy me $10 billion worth of U.S. Treasuries." I can't do that with Europe. I still have to make the same decision as if the individual currencies are there. Do I want Germany? Do I want Netherlands? Do I want France? What about Italy? I still got to make the same decisions because they never consolidated the debt. This is the risk that Europe has. And I've warned them. And they know this. Okay. When Greece went for its IMF loan in 2010, it set off a contagion. The traders immediately said, oh, who's next? Oh, maybe Spain. All right. You go, why? Basically, because once the IMF did that, it confirmed one, the euro was not properly set up. There was no central mechanism to deal with a member who was bankrupt. They still had to go outside the EU to the IMF. All right. And so all these things, came to a head. What's going to be the problem with if France does that? France is the number 2 economy in the EU. Same thing's going to happen. The big money is going to look at it. Oh, shit. Who's next? Is it Germany? Just look at what's going on with the German debt. You have mints, pushing for deficits and things of this nature. They're not the bulwark of what they were 20 years ago. And all these decisions that have come from Brussels have been absolutely brain dead. I mean, if you wanted to destroy an economy and you want to make a conspiracy theory up, they followed it to the T. First, you put in the COVID. They locked everybody down. Cost a lot of small businesses, then you went crazy with the climate change. Then on top of that, you put sanctions on Russia.
Right.
I mean, if you look at it, the German economy has actually shrunk. I'm talking about the size, number of jobs, etc. It's shrunk by at least 3%. Then you have NATO, who only wants war. That's their whole purpose in life. All right? Saying, oh, Russia's going to invade any day, so you better give us 5% now, and we'll protect you. All right? All they're doing is, like any agency, and I don't care what you create them for, no agency is ever going to, just simply say, oh, okay, fine, shut us down. That's their salaries, their pensions, all that's there. I saw the internal memos from NATO, and when all the money was going to climate change, they got really upset. Oh, how do we remain relevant?
Of course, Mark. Let's go to the financial markets, because everyone who's watching this, they want to know your opinion. You're the sage. The markets are way up. Are we seeing a last hooray before the collapse in the stock markets?
No, what you have to understand is that when you get this nonsense of beating war drums, it also is sending capital to the United States, the same as it did for World War I and World War II. And I've warned about this, and people are starting to see what I've been saying for a long time. I said, gold will go up with the dollar and the stock market. Oh, how is that possible? I said, it's all capital flow. All right. We have, some of the largest institutions in Europe. I told them, you better get your gold the hell out of there and move it. Because when that first bullet is shot, okay, look at what Europe does historically. World War I, they shut down all the European stock markets. All right. You will not get anything out. They are pushing very rapidly for central bank digital currency, which is capital controls. Spain canceled you can't take more than 3,000 euros out of your account without government permission.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You can't spend more than 1,000 euros in a hotel in cash, and it has to be on a card. I mean, what U.S. has never canceled its currency. That's why the U.S. dollar, to a large extent, is the reserve currency. About 70% of the paper dollars are outside the United States. People know I can hold a $100 bill, they don't cancel it. If I hold a 500 euro note, they cancel it.
Yep.
Britain, you got old notes with the Queen on it, no good. Canada canceled all its high denomination notes last year. Switzerland did the same thing. It's
in the old days, you could buy like a bubble gum with 1,000 Swiss franc note.
Yeah. This is the problem. They really are just communist, like Bud Light beer, They don't go with the whole 9 yards, but they come as close as they possibly can. They cancel the currency because they think you are basically a piece of shit. And if you got a couple 100,000 euros in your safety deposit box, you didn't pay taxes, you're really a criminal. So we cancel it forces you to come out and say, "Here, I got a couple 100,000." Where'd you get that? Did you pay your taxes? You know, this is why they do that. You know, and
Let me ask you something
it's
else.
crazy.
Because again, if you're in the investor, small investor, what should investors watch for, the turning point, like so they know when to sell or when not to come into the market?
If you step back and look, you'll see the U.S. share markets are making new highs.
Yep.
The other ones are not, going down. This is capital flows. All right. That's simply where it is. Mainly because you have people that understand what we're talking about. Some will buy gold. That can be a retail guy. Major institutions, big ones, they can't park that much money there. All right. So they buy more of they buy the blue chip stocks. When you see the Dow Jones leading the NASDAQ, that's showing it's foreign capital. They buy the big, cap stocks. They don't buy the IPOs. Then you have others that buy the U.S. debt. Um, you can look at, you pick up the rug and you look, say, oh, Japan's one of the largest holders of U.S. debt. Fine. Pick up the rug and look closely. It's not the government. It's the corporations. The Japanese corporations are the largest holders of U.S. debt as a hedge against their own government. We're going with negative interest rates.
Right. For 30 years now.
And you had even the Bank of Japan come out and brag that they had bought 97% of their own auction. That's something to brag about. That shows that nobody wanted it.
Martin, let me ask you this. Imagine you're a small time investor. You have $10,000. Okay. What would you do with that money? Where would you put it?
Well, I think, some high cap U.S. stocks are fine for liquidity purposes. If you're looking for more of a long term, depends if you're going to need the money or not, then you would be looking at gold. Gold is neutral. You get these people that don't understand international finance. Oh, central banks are buying gold because they think the dollar is going down. No, they're not. What it is that when the Biden administration put the sanctions on Russia to remove them from SWIFT, then you have the neocon Blinken actually threaten China. If you do this, you help Russia, we'll do the same to you. Oh, really? So then they start dumping 50 billion holdings of U.S. debt. You do not hold the debt of someone who's threatening you with war. I mean, it's they only look at their own myopic objective. These people are not that smart. If they were really smart and really knew what they were doing, they wouldn't be calling me in. Simple as that. All right. They don't know what the hell they're doing. I took one member of staff with me to Capitol Hill. I said, "You sure you want to see what I see?" "No, let me go." We walked out afterwards. He goes, "Holy shit, they don't know anything." I said, "I told you." You can't threaten China, which held 10% of the U.S. national debt, that if you help Russia, we'll remove you from SWIFT. That's what created BRICS. All right. They didn't create BRICS because they thought the dollar is going down. They did it because of geopolitical reasons. India joined for the same reason. You can't threaten people. You're going to do as I command or else.
Martin, what's going to happen to gold? Is it going to go way up? Because people are saying it's going to go to $5,000, $10,000, $50,000, $100,000 per ounce. Where do you see gold going over the next year?
No, I think you're still on the path to test the 5,000 level. I don't think you're looking at 10,000 or 100,000, that sort of thing. The one thing that gold um, has the advantage of over most other things is that it's the same standard and quality that trades in London, New York, and Tokyo and Hong Kong. Not all commodities are like that. You have Brent crude, which is a different quality than New York's wheat. All right, so wheat, it's not all the same. Generally, yes, okay, fine, you can trade wheat one way or another, but gold is the same. It is really more of a international commodity per se.
So do you see governments actually suppressing or confiscating gold, silver as safe havens, as they did back when in the 1930s?
No, not in the United States. The that is more likely in Europe. Mainly, why FDR did that was because he was going to basically devalue the dollar, and he wanted to make that profit to fund his
Of course.
socialistic agenda. All right, but you still have plenty of $20 gold pieces around. Why? Because they did not go house to house knocking on the door and say, "Give me all your $20 gold pieces out of your sock drawer." What they did was that the institutions were ordered to turn it over. They have to do so because they're licensed. Even the Federal Reserve had to turn over its gold reserves as well. Most people don't know that. That's why they say Fort Knox, etc. Fed doesn't have any gold. It had to turn it over. Um, so, I mean, there were some Supreme Court cases you can look at it called the Gold Clause cases where there was a contract that said you were going to repay in gold and went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said no, the government can nullify that. So you have a contract, I'm lending you 10 ounces of gold, you got to give me 10 ounces of gold back, and then they can change the law and you give me 10 euros back or whatever. So you have to be careful with that sort of thing. Europe is more socialistic, like FDR was. So there's a greater risk of them using particularly the CBDCs to shut down the economy. You can't move money out, total capital controls.
So do
And
you
that's
think that
why
this, do
a
you
lot
think,
of the gold has been
so,
moving from Europe to America and Singapore.
so do you think the CBDC, central bank digital currencies, are actually being designed precisely to replace gold as safe haven?
Uh, it's more of a um, the same thing they did for World War One. They want to shut down capital controls. They when war comes, capital flees, and they want that money to stay there so they can grab it, they can fund their wars, etc. You had Ursula come out and saying that actually is talking about confiscating unused funds in people's accounts.
Right.
All right, that's exactly what Germany did in December 22. That's what started the hyperinflation. People got that wrong. It wasn't the printing of the money. That came as a result of, not, it wasn't that's the chicken, not the egg. What they did first in December 22 was they basically confiscated 10% of everybody's accounts so they could make their reparation payments. Once they did that, that set off the panic. Anybody that had any money there in Germany got it the hell out. All right. That's what the hyperinflation then starts a few months later in 23. Government, that when Hitler comes to power, all right, he passes a law in 1933 that it's against the law for a German to have an account outside of Germany.
Right.
That's what, in 1934, that's why the Swiss start the numbered accounts. So the reason he passed that was what I'm talking about. When they, in 22, people moved money to every other currency but German. All right. So they all had these accounts outside the country and kept them there. He wanted the money to come back so he could fund his agenda. All right. So then he passes that law. You cannot have an account outside of Germany without government permission.
Martin,
So
what asset classes? Well, because again, people have money, whatever it is, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000, whatever each individual's wealth is. But what asset classes will become lifeboats in upcoming collapse?
usually it is like the tangible asset type things. Um, if you look from the German hyperinflation, the stuff that really survives, um, when they came out with a new currency in 1925, it was backed by real estate, raw land. Um, so it's that sort of thing.
But do you
That
see real estate as safe haven, or will it also collapse under debt pressure?
uh, well, debt,
Look at
yes. I
Canada.
mean,
Look at
that's
Canada, for
why
example.
FDR created the 30-year mortgage, because people didn't have the cash to buy. Um, there was a shortage of cash. Uh, this is why the ECB had negative interest rates for so long. They do not understand how the economy functions. When you go into a recession or a depression, all right, people do not spend their money. They hoard it. They save it for a rainy day. All right. You can take interest rates to negative. Doesn't matter. They're not going to borrow or invest in the future until they see an opportunity that is actually there. We've done these studies. The stock market has never peaked with the same interest rate level twice in history. If you think the stock market will double next year, you'll pay 20%. But if you don't think it's going to go up 1%, you're not going to borrow at 1. Simple as that. It's the expectation. So it's the tangible stuff. I mean, collectibles, um, art, jewelry, stuff like that. These things make the transition from one currency to whatever the new one's going to be.
What about Bitcoin and crypto? Safe harbor or state-controlled trap?
No, I'd be very careful about that. Bitcoin is more of what has made it so popular, honestly, is that it's a great money laundering thing. Um,
Of course it is.
uh, yeah, I mean, look, it got all the volume initially because the Chinese figured that out. They could buy the Bitcoin in China, sell it in the United States. They got their money out, and then the volume was all 90% was all coming from China, and then the central bank figured out what was going on, called in all the Bitcoin people there, and started putting clamps down. Uh, Canadians, Europeans, I hear from them all. They use the Bitcoin not as an investment, just to get the money out of one country to another. That's it. Because it's like gold in that sense that it's the same thing everywhere. All right. But if you think you can um, hold that as some sort of reserve or whatever, forget it. Because at the same time, they can just pass a law and that's it. It's illegal, whatever. I think gold is much safer. And plus, they'll probably shut down Bitcoin and the cryptos when they come out with their own CBDC. They won't want any competition.
They don't want any competition. We have about 7 minutes left, but before we talk about your crystal ball, I want to ask you: does your model, and I'll give you the floor in a couple of minutes to explain how it works, but does your model foresee a major global war as part of this global reset we're seeing right now?
Oh, yes, unfortunately. Um, I think, the best way I can describe it is that the computer has taught me a lot over the years. Um, as I said, the first time we got called in by the Central Bank of Lebanon, and they asked if we could do a model on their Lebanese pound. They had some book. All the prices were written down to mid 1800s, and we put it in, and the computer came out and said their currency was going to fall apart in 8 days. I thought there was something wrong with the data. I called the client. I said, "Look, something's got to be bad here." They knew it. They were only coming to us for the timing, and very calmly said, "Well, what currency would it recommend?" I said, "It says the Swiss franc." All right. 8 days later, the Civil War began. I saw the same thing when Iraq War. I had a call from a client there who was the biggest shipper in the Gulf. He says, Iraq's going to start attacking shipping in the Gulf tomorrow. What do you think gold's going to do? I said, you tell me a war's going to start? Yeah. So by the time 1998, I stood up at our conference in London. I said, look, Russia's going to collapse. I give it about 30 days. And I didn't realize at the time, but the London Financial Times had snuck in the back. They put that on the front page. Armstrong says Russia's going to collapse on June 27th, and that was the long-term capital management crisis that starts, at the end of August. What it's taught me is that somebody always knows war is coming in advance. And it's also taught me over the years that you don't see war when everybody's fat and happy. War comes when the economy's turned down. People get frustrated, they want to blame somebody else, whatever. So what the computer is showing this time, this is more than just Russia versus Europe. You're seeing the Middle East. You're seeing it, Thailand versus Cambodia, India versus, Pakistan.
Right.
It's everywhere. And it's systemic, and it's a contagion. Like Rome overthrew its king in 509 BC. Within 6 months, Athens says that's a good idea and overthrow their tyrants, and democracy's born. Tiananmen Square falls, Berlin Wall falls a few months later. American Revolution goes, oh, that's a good idea. The French Revolution starts. These things are always a contagion. 1848 throughout Europe starts down, in Italy, go, oh, that's a good thing. Boom. Next thing you know, all the countries are revolting. So it seems as though if you turn the economy down, that's when you get the rise in war factors. And that's what we're seeing for next year going into there. But it's not just like the old days, allies versus this one. This is more. It's more of a contagion on a global scale.
So within this contagion, is Europe the first domino in the next global collapse?
Most likely, mainly because Europe really needs it very badly. At the same time, you have a lot of anti-Semitism rising because of the whole Gaza thing. I understand Netanyahu's ideas, but he's making it look very anti-Semitic. It's so then you have those problems rising again, and that filters around everywhere. So you begin to hear it even in Washington and Europe and.
Martin, if Europe falls, because we have a lot of people who follow us in Europe, and hopefully they'll start following you a lot through our channel as well. My question is, what does European collapse look like?
Mostly you're looking at 3 years ago when I would do seminar or these podcasts throughout Europe, they would say, you really think the EU is going to break up? Now I get when. pretty much I hear the same thing if it's from Serbia, Croatia, you name it. We've kind of had enough. Uh, they they took uh, you take the migrant issue. Uh, I was on the phone with Romania just a couple days ago. They were ordered to take in 100,000 people.
Imagine that.
And the reason is they really think that they're going to be able to train these people, draft them, and then send them against Russia. I mean, look at the police force in Berlin. Most of the people don't even speak German anymore. Um, this is not a good idea. Um, I can give you an example from history. When Attila the Hun was moving from Asia, the German Goths petitioned the Roman Emperor, could they please come in? He allowed them in for the same reason. He thought he could use them, train them to build a bigger army to defend against Attila. He trained them. They learned all Roman tactics. Said thank you very much. They turned on the emperor and killed him in battle. um, it's these people are not going to fight for Europe. On some, to defend what it stands for. I mean, it's like they're mercenaries. Whoever's going to pay them the most money, that's going to be it.
Martin, I'm going to ask you two quick questions, and I want to talk about your model, and we're done. If you, Martin Armstrong, had to leave one warning for the next, let's say, 2 years, what would it be? And as a follow-up question, if people can only do one thing to prepare, what should it be? So let's talk about what warning would you leave and one thing that you would tell people to do.
Well, I do these podcasts all over mainly because I feel I have an obligation at least to speak out and try and reduce the amplitude of war if I possibly can. I don't think I can stop it. I think the best you can do is hopefully reduce the amplitude, the volatility of it. I am concerned that Putin is probably the smartest guy at the table. And if you look at this objectively, NATO, Putin has laid down many red lines. And NATO deliberately crosses each and every one of them. Why? You can look this up. It's called rally around the flag. It's a psychological war tactic. Yep. And they desperately need him to attack anything in NATO. All right? So then they can call him the aggressor. I spoke to Ukrainians. Initially, they were told just to go to the border. All right? They had no idea they were going to invade the Kursk region. I was told that order came from MI6. You've had Boris Johnson hop on the plane. No, Zelensky, you're not allowed to sign a peace deal. He's been on the front page of the Norwegian press. We're in a proxy war with Russia. I mean, the Ukrainians I speak to, I feel sorry for them. They hate Zelensky, and they feel that as if they're not allowed to have peace without permission from London, Paris, and Washington, and NATO. They're not in charge of their own country. I mean, that's a sad story. I mean, they go, oh, well, there's war. He can't, come on, knock that off. 8 million people fled from Ukraine to Europe. 5 million went to...
Actually more. Martin, we have about 2 minutes left. But very quickly, if people could only do one thing to prepare, what should they do? What should they prepare for?
I think you should have probably a couple years worth of food, because there's always going to be shortages when you get into this.
Do you see it? Do you see Europe? Because again, if you look at Germany, they're getting ready for a hot war with Russia. Are these people serious?
What I have been in discussions with people from different governments. And I can't believe it, but I've actually been told, oh, Putin would never push the button because he knows it would blow back on him. Really. But you people are not talking about pushing him out of Ukraine. You're talking about conquering Russia. You have Kayla saying it's too big and should be broken up. This is not just pushing them out of Ukraine and we're okay. This is not it. They really think they can conquer Russia, strip all its assets, because it's got 75 trillion in natural resources, and they will rise again like the Roman Empire and rule the world. This is really what these people think.
Mark, we're out of time, but before we go, please explain how your wonderful crystal ball works. What's it called? How can people get to it? What does it cost? And what does it do?
Well, being an international hedge fund manager, I saw how capital really moves from one place to another. They're actually like a herd of wild animals, really. So I built a computer that I taught it how I would how to trade. It's not a neural net black box. They're good for retrieval, but that's about it. They don't come up with anything original. And so when I created it, I basically had everything imaginable we could put in. We have wars, climate, you name it. It's every database we could get our hands on, we have in there. We have currencies back, the 1700s, if not further. We have reassembled all the Roman monetary history, put that in to answer questions like how did Rome fall? When you put it all together, we saw it collapsed in just 8 years. It wasn't a slow, gradual process. These things are violent. So by putting this all in, and the computer is monitoring absolutely everything in the world. And you can't be correct on a forecast of gold, for example, if you're only looking at gold. Because the wild card always comes from the outside. War event, default, or whatever. So you must look at the entire world to have a shot at this coming out as, consistently correct. And so it's not my personal opinion. It's anytime I have an opinion and I'm not sure, I'm the one that's wrong. The computer always beats me. So it is enlightening in the sense that it's showing the world there is another way. And that's why they're actually making a Hollywood movie out of this whole thing now.
Or are they?
The head of the studios are coming here September, late at the end of September. They understand. And they said, this is really the way we should be looking at the world. It's not linear.
So how can people purchase it or have a look at what you do? Like where can they find this?
ArmstrongEconomics.com. We do have a private blog you can go on. It's like we try and keep it extremely reasonable for the average person, like $15 a month. We're more interested in trying to help everybody as we possibly can. The blog, you don't even have to put in an email. We don't sell advertising. We keep it as an open source. We're not blocked anywhere. You can even see it in China, Russia. So everybody understands it's not me personally. These forecasts are come out from the computer. I try my best to explain what, and once they understand the system, you can look at its timing forecast on any market in the world. Once you understand how to use it on one, it's the same around the world. That's why all these institutions and central banks and everybody, they use us because it's not personal and there's no conflict of interest.
Martin, we're out of time. Thanks so much for joining us. It's amazing always having you on the show. History, economics, politics, all in one. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Take care. Bye-bye.